Good morning, everybody. So today it is Tuesday, the 19th of January, and today we're going to be continuing on with our more of an independent version of our first person narrative. So this is your do now for today. This is also available on your home learning sheet with the plan attached as well. If you don't want to print that off, then you can pause the video here and copy it up with the necessary corrections added in. So when we had almost reached the sea, someone shouted behind us, "Is this the thanks we deserve?" I waded into the sea with the boat, got inside and rowed away. Please pause the video here while you make the necessary corrections to the text and press play once you are ready to continue on. Okay, great job. So let's see how we did. Firstly, you need a comma after see because you have a subordinate clause and it begins with a subordinate conjunction when. You also need a comma after us because you are introducing speech after that. You need a capital I for is, because that's the first word of your speech. And then you need a question mark after, is this the thanks we deserve? Because it's a question. And then you need to make sure you drop a line for the following part. You want we waded into the sea because you've referred to we earlier on, not I. So you need to change it to we. And it was too repetitive with sea, so I changed the second C into water. So you might have had ocean or a different noun, and then you need a comma after boat because you are listing what you did. So well done if you found all of those, and please pause the video again to make any adjustments that you didn't quite spot. Okay, so in this paragraph, it is up to you if you are writing just about Zoe or Zoe and Munchkin, but they are both, or one of them will be heading towards Laika. It's up to you what sort of scenery you want to describe for that one. If it's just Zoe or Zoe and Munchkin, either way, she or they will be spotted by people from Eels Island. You could include Doobie in this. So Doobie should be a character you're getting to know from Floodland that we're reading in our morning and afternoon briefings. Not a particularly kind person, so it might be interesting to have him as part of the mob, and you want them to be shouted at by the mob, maybe some threats and so on. And then they're going to continue to race to Laika, or Zoe will if she's going on her own, and then you want to describe how Zoe or how they both felt when they reached the boat. It's also up to you if you want to lose Munchkin in this paragraph. You might have started off with him, and then maybe they get separated and then Zoe still continues to flee. That's up to you because again you've got a bit more freedom with this one to go down the plot line that you want to include. That you want to follow, sorry. So our key features that we want to make sure that we are including in our writing this week, the first one highlighted in yellow is show not tell, and that's because that was the corresponding Walt to this paragraph last week. We also want to make sure we are still using adverbials, prepositions and conjunctions for cohesion. We also want to make sure we're using subordinate clauses, relative clauses. It's really important it's written in past tense. We want to keep it in first person. I for just Zoe, or we if you're referring to Zoe and Munchkin. If you're using dialogue, that we use appropriate punctuation, that we use short sentences and deliberate repetition for emphasis and tension. That was done brilliantly well last week. Rhetorical questions can be used throughout the writing. I know it's a step in yesterday's lesson, but we can use it in other paragraphs. Just try not to overdo it. Figurative language, always extremely effective, especially in a tense setting like this one, and try and use unique phrases and vocabulary you have drawn from your wider reading too, as that's what will set you apart from the other writers in your class. So this plan, that is available on your home learning sheet. Please pause the video here and download it if you haven't already, and then I will be working through that with you to show you the possible ideas you could have for each step. We'll write one together and I'll give you some images to help inspire some creativity as well. Okay, so pause the video here and download that if you haven't already. Great, so I've got my planning sheet here. I'm just going to talk you through some ideas that you might want to use for when you come to do your plan as well. So the mob shouted at me and us. Well, have a think now for a moment. How might you change this up a little bit? Last week we did have that there was going to be somebody behind who shouted and a threat. I wonder what other ways you can think of that you could include here. Take a moment to think about that. Okay, lovely. I wonder if any of you thought about somebody maybe grabbing Zoe or Munchkin rather than just shouting. Maybe they run up from behind and grab hold of them to stop them from running any further. And then you could plan in what sort of speech would go with that action. I wonder if some of you thought of somebody actually jumping in front of Zoe and Munchkin rather than from coming up behind. They could have been hiding behind a wall, for instance, or from round the corner of a building and jumped out in front of them instead and shouted at them. It might also be interesting as well to think about how Zoe and Munchkin might run and dodge them to avoid running directly into them. Maybe they come face to face with an angry mob instead. And I wonder if any of you thought that maybe you might have someone who they knew as part of that group of people, or even just one person they knew who was on their own, such as Doobie. Maybe no one else knew they were escaping. And I know the step does say a mob shouted at me and us, but I'm still looking for ways to make it different. So perhaps Doobie realised and has followed them and has caught up with them and confronts them. So what I'd love for you to do for this part now, I know I've written 4 different ideas. You only need to write down one. And what I think you should do is write down if you want them to be from behind, that you want the person to grab them or jump in front of them. Maybe the verb for their speech and what they said. So just plan just one quick little line with some notes about where that person where that voice came from that's talking to them, how they said their speech and what they actually said. Pause the video here while you catch up with that. Okay, well done. So hopefully you've got a line that looks something like this, where I've got my direction of the voice, the verb and the speech. Or of course you may have selected a different idea. So looking at this bit, we headed towards the object. Now, what I want you to think about is last week we were looking at how Zoe may have run across a waterlogged field. You may still want to use that idea in your writing this week if you haven't already, and I've got some images here that might help inspire you. So here is the field I was imagining when I was writing my story, where you can imagine it be incredibly difficult not to slip on the mud. I thought that this might be an interesting one to go for as well, because you've got a really steep sand dune or a bank of sand, and you can imagine running so quickly that you're losing control over your footing and maybe stumble and slide down. We've got incredibly wet sand that maybe Zoe is sinking into or Munchkin's sinking into. They might even have to help each other up along the way if they fall over or slip. And finally, we've got a pebbly beach. Not all beaches are sandy, some are pebbly. And you can imagine the difficulties with this, can't you? That the pebbles are wet with seaweed and the water from the sea. And also it would be incredibly painful to run on a beach like that if you didn't have very good, very supportive footwear, which maybe Zoe and Munchkin are in that situation because there aren't a lot of resources. Of course, if you have your own idea of where you want them to be running through, then feel free to use your own ideas. But I would recommend that you give yourself a little heading like this, headed across, and then you can choose an idea. So I've got here slippery pebbles, wet sand. Oh, the cave, I almost forgot. So you can see that I've started to plan in towards Laika, and I've been thinking about where Laika might be hidden. And Laika could be hidden, perhaps, in a cave, and maybe you want to have that as your travelling through part to show that and you can imagine how dark and wet it is, and again how slippery. So that was the cave, skidding down sand dunes or waterlogged fields. This is an important one to include because we want to show that progression of they've travelled from one place, which is maybe outside the cathedral or in the streets, and now they're heading across a different sort of terrain and through a different environment. And it gives a real sense that we're travelling with the character and we're not just saying that they were in one place and then instantly in another. So pause the video here while you jot down one of these ideas. Great job. I'd love to know what you've chosen. And then next, towards Leica. Now, what I mean by this is where was Leica hidden? So, as I've mentioned, Leica could have been hidden inside a cave because it's dark and people wouldn't really be able to have found the boat very easily. Last week, we talked about a shed. Maybe a rundown shed being used as to store the boat, so you could use an idea like that. Or maybe even covering the boat with some sort of sheet or material or tarpaulin. You might have your own ideas of where Leica is hidden. I've jotted mine down here, so pick one of them or one of your own ideas and jot that into your plan now too. Well done. Pause it here if you do need to catch up to add any more information into these boxes, but I am going to move on. And our final section now of our plan is thoughts and feelings when I or we reached the object. Now, I'd like you to think about, I've put progression here, and that's because I think it would be really interesting to show how Zoe has developed as a character since our first narrative. Now, Zoe last week was maybe quite afraid, very nervous. She'd never tried anything like that before, whereas this Zoe in this piece of writing has already survived a voyage across the ocean in a small boat. So she's going to be feeling perhaps a little bit more confident. So to show confidence, I've got a couple of images here. Well, sorry, one image. So we've got Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. She was what I imagined when a confident woman and taking on a really intimidating challenge. So again, she's narrowed her eyes. She's got a steely stare, a steely gaze. Her posture is very, very confident. Her shoulders are back. She's looking upright. She's looking ahead. Whereas, what's the emotion on this lady's face here? What would that be showing and telling? How could we use this if Zoe was feeling this way? Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely fear, isn't it? So, the panic, eyes widen, you can see. Her eyes are wide here. She's maybe trembling. I like in this one, she's looking over her shoulder, and perhaps Zoe, when she gets to the boat and she's trying to release it, could be looking behind her because she's hearing noises and she's quite panicked. Whereas if she's feeling very confident, she'd be very focused on what she's doing, and that could be a really nice way to make your writing different than last week's, and also thinking about Zoe's character. Of course, you might want to talk about how she was feeling fear and think about that show not tell there as well. I also think it might be quite nice if you contrast Munchkin and Zoe. Munchkin, I think, would be feeling a lot more afraid than Zoe at this point. So you might use him to show not tell fear, and maybe Zoe for confidence. So what I'd like you to do is to jot down one of the show not tell emotions you want to describe as Zoe is either going through the cave or unlocking the shed door or uncovering the boat. Pause the video here while you jot down the emotion and how you're going to show that emotion. Great job. And now finally, our last little bit to plan is that feeling of when she finally unlocks the door or goes into the cave or uncovers the boat. So I think a key one would be relief. The knot in my stomach loosened, my shoulders relaxed. Again, think of all those different ideas that we discussed last week for that show not tell of how you can show relief. So pause the video here. I would jot down relief or maybe excitement or anticipation, whatever emotion you think would work well here. Jot it down and then the show not tell that will match. Okay, well done. So hopefully now you've got a plan for your paragraph, but this isn't all we're doing today. This is just going to help us with our writing. Now you can see here that I have a completed version that I've already written. I've had a couple of technical issues today, so I am going to talk you through my paragraph rather than share writing it with you, which I'd have preferred to have done, but I'm just going to talk you through my choices. So if I just turn this over and we can talk about what were the choices I made and why I made them. So you can see that I initially put my steps of success at the top of my page. You might find that helpful to keep you on the right track and to make sure that you are including those steps. Of course, I don't mind if you want to rearrange a couple of them, but really we need to end at the same point, which is that Zoe and Munchkin, or just Zoe, will have uncovered the boat at the end of the paragraph. So let's take a look at my red section. When we were just a few moments away from reaching the pebbly shore, comma, I shuddered when I heard a voice behind me. Zoe, get back here, exclaimed Doobie. I've used this opener here, when we were just a few moments away from reaching the pebbly shore, because I feel that that will link to my previous paragraph. It's showing how they've moved location and also giving a sense of time. So when they were getting there, this happened. So this is why subordinate clauses are really helpful with adding cohesion to our writing. You can see also that I edited this in here for a bit more show not tell. I initially had I heard a voice, but I've now expanded that to I shuddered when I heard a voice, which shows that Zoe was feeling afraid or repulsed by Doobie. And Doobie, I think, would be a good character to include in this if you wanted to have someone who they knew, because he's the villain of Eels Island, isn't he? I've kept it quite simple with the speech, Zoe, get back here, although you can make this more interesting and exciting if you wish to. Now, one way that you can change it a little bit is if I show you here, this red section, just focus on this one for now. When we were just moments away from reaching the pebbly shoreline, okay, so pretty similar so far, a figure jumped out from behind a wall and grabbed my arms with a pincer-like grip. So you can imagine how firmly she's being pinned, she's been stopped by somebody. So a different idea than in this one. Oh dear, Zoe, hissed Doobie's voice down my ear. I hope you weren't planning on leaving without saying goodbye. So I think this is really quite sinister, because I think sometimes that whispering or hissing sounds much more menacing than just shouting. And I've broken up the speech with how he spoke, how he said those words, just to disrupt the flow a little bit. My heart was fluttering like a leaf, but I quickly stomped on his foot and shoved him to the ground. Munchkin, run! We don't have much time, I ordered. So this one is much longer than this example. This shows how you can really embellish and develop some of those key points, where we don't just have Doobie exclaiming, he grabs Zoe, and then we have a bit of a scene where she escapes from him by stomping on his foot. She shoves him away, and then she gives an instruction to carry on. It's important that I've included these parts here, because it wouldn't make sense if he'd grabbed her and then she continued running. I need to explain how that ended, and then how they continued on their journey just afterwards. So this is a much more challenging version of this red part, but I wanted to share that with you. Hopefully it might inspire some ideas of your own. So moving on now, we're looking at our blue section. My chest heaved and ached, but I pushed ahead even harder. So I've got some show not tell to show how tired Zoe is at this point. We spent a lot of time on this last week, talking about how we could show that she's physically exhausted, such as her lungs were burning, her legs were in pain, maybe she's getting cramp in her legs from running for so long. So you can use your own show not tell ideas here to show how she's feeling tired. I skidded across the slippery pebbles and dashed towards the tattered tarpaulin that covered Leica. So I've mentioned what I was running across, like I planned in before, and I've said that they're slippery, so give an idea that, again, the journey is difficult. And I've given an end destination just so it is cohesive to the tattered tarpaulin that covered Leica. Obviously, whatever you want to write about, you can use there instead. And I've just used conjunctions to link my ideas together, because otherwise it would be a bit clunky. I skidded across the slippery pebbles, full stop. I dashed towards the tattered tarpaulin. Again, using the and just, again, links those ideas together and makes it flow much better. And then finally, my green section. So she's finally reached Leica now. So we've got, I steadied my breathing and focused on untying the knots of the frayed fabric. Sorry, my S has gone a bit funny there. So I steadied my breathing. She's calming herself down and she's focused, and she's untying. The fabric is wrapped around Leica and covered in that way. Within a few moments, comma, so I've got an opener here, need to remember my comma, my boat was free and a smile flickered across my lips. So I'm showing at the end that she's faintly happy. She's almost daring not to be, but she can't help herself. That she's finally succeeded in getting the boat free. So I've read my paragraph out to you. You can see that I did make 1 or 2 adjustments here. If I dotted any words, then I would have to make sure that I checked my spellings. So what I would like you to do at that point is, once you have written your paragraph, is to take a look at the back of this sheet, or the second page if you're using it online, and you've got an editing checklist. I want you to take a look at the checklist and to tick off once you have edited or checked for those mistakes or errors in your work. So for example, I want you to tick this off once you're confident that you know you've written everything in the past tense, because that's a really easy fix. Once you've checked for any missing words, I added in a little extra phrase here. You might have a missing word or two. Very easily done, but give it a tick once you've checked for that. Once you're confident all punctuation has been included, tick number 3. You might want to up-level vocabulary and not repeat words as well. Like, if you repeat words that's not in a non-deliberate way, it can detract from the quality of your writing. So it's important that you are aware of that. That your ideas link together. What we don't want in this paragraph is Zoe is in one place, then she's suddenly somewhere else, and then suddenly she's at the boat. We want to know what happens in between, and the way you can do that is by using adverbials. We want to make sure that we've got a range of sentence types as well. So we really love seeing these complex sentences with the subordinate clauses, but also sometimes having a sentence like this connected with an and is all you need. And finally, as I've mentioned, just spellings have been checked. Really, really important. You can access your 5-6 words online if you just type them in. You will be familiar with them from when we've done the dictation exercises, but really checking that you're using those spelling rules accurately, and if you are unsure of any spellings, please use a dictionary. You can use them online, or you might have a dictionary in your house, but really, really important that you are checking your spellings and you are submitting a piece of work that you know that you have taken a lot of care over, and you have double checked before you accepted feedback from your teacher. Okay, hopefully that is clear enough for you. Really excited to see all the different directions that these paragraphs can take. I'm really hopeful that you'll have lots of different ideas for each section and make something that's really unique. All right then, take care everybody, and I'll catch up with you all tomorrow for our next paragraph. Bye-bye.